joined by Conservative MP Aphra Brandreth. That's correct. Sorry, apologies.
That's right.
I did say I was rubbish with names, didn't I? Aphra, let's talk first about the distribution. You're an MP in this particular area. You now know that you've got over 600 asylum seekers. That's a huge increase based on 2014. Meanwhile, there are other councils in the UK who are housing none. Basic question, is that fair?
Well, I mean, we have seen a huge increase in the number of asylum seekers, and I can understand why people are frustrated. And yeah, it doesn't seem fair, does it, that there is an even distribution? But also there's a question for people locally that they know they're fair-minded people, but services are stretched, housing stretched, GP appointments are stretched, school places are stretched, and they just feel actually we need to be addressing some of those issues. They want to help other people, but they know that they need to make sure there's a place for their kids to go to school and a doctor's appointment when they need it first.
Well, what would a Conservative approach to this be then? Of course, you had X number of years in government and weren't able to tackle this. We've gone from stopping the boats to smashing the gangs, and yet we're still seeing all of these migrants coming into the UK. What would you do now? If you were able to turn back the clock, what would the Conservative government do differently?
I mean, it's completely frustrating, and I understand why people feel like that. Having said that, since Labour's come in, we've already seen this year so far compared to last year an increase of about 30% in illegal boat crossings. And one of the reasons for that is almost immediately after they got in, they scrapped the Illegal Migration Act that the Conservatives have brought in that would have meant if people come here illegally, they can't claim asylum. And I think that's what people want locally. They want to feel like you don't get to jump to the front of the queue if you do something illegal. And so we would not have scrapped that. We need to have a proper deterrent. We certainly can't have these spurious claims of people who are foreign offenders, for example, basically putting forward any kind of excuse to try and stay here. So we need to have a firm policy, but where it's right to help people, like we have done with the war in Ukraine, we need to make sure that we're helping those who really need it.
Now, you mentioned the boat crossings, but I'm sure if Labour were here, they would argue that we've had immigration figures today and that they've halved it from, I think, was it 860,000 down to 431,000. So I think they would argue perhaps that they're doing quite a good job there. What would your response to that be?
Well, it's good news. That's legal migration and that's come down. Those are actually the figures for 2024. And I think it's pretty generally accepted that that was because of policies that the Conservatives brought in, that we're seeing the impact coming through for those figures from 2024, changes that we made to the visa system. We need to do more and we need to go further, but it's clear that Labour aren't going to do that. We had a debate in Parliament yesterday. I was there, I spoke in the debate, we had a vote, and on that we were saying that we need to have a binding cap on legal migration. Labour voted against it, and our Reform MPs didn't even turn up in the chamber for the debate. So it's clear that other parties just aren't even trying to find a credible way of actually dealing with this issue.
Just going back to the figures about particularly Cheshire West and Chester, the data shows that back in 2014, for every 10,000 of the population, there was 0.03 of an asylum seeker. Now, this figures show that per 10,000 of the population, there are 17 asylum seekers. What do you make of that? And what would you say to your constituents who are concerned? Because if you work at that as a percentage increase, that's over 56,000%. What would you say to your constituents who are worried about the potential for exponential growth?
I was pretty shocked when you told me 56,000%. That is huge. And I think it just really illustrates the issue that we've got. And people keep talking about this, and I want them to know that we are listening, we're taking it seriously. That's why we had a debate on this yesterday in Parliament. We are pushing to try and get the changes that we need, both on illegal migration, but ultimately also in terms of stopping people coming here illegally. It's just not fair, and we need to make sure we have a fair system and that also we're dealing with the issues for people locally so they can get the services they need here in Cheshire.
Aphra Brandreth, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. There we are, views there of a Conservative MP. I must say we did invite Labour MPs from the area and Reform MP, but they were unavailable, they said, to speak to us. But that's the views there of the Conservative Party.